I've spent a long time trying to understand what happened, and I still don't. It isn't a matter of unsolved mystery, just a lack of explanation that I've learned to live with. I work a pretty unremarkable job, mostly paperwork and phone calls, and my life was quiet before all this. It started with a package, delivered to the office like any other, but that's as clean as the story gets. I've replayed it in my head countless times, and it still feels unreal. The rest of the day was normal, I guess. Back to spreadsheets and conference calls. I tried to shake off the feeling about the package, about Dora. It was just a missed delivery, and she was probably just having a weird day. People do that. I even caught myself checking the internal directory for Weston, just to see if there was any note about a transfer or something, anything that would explain why a package addressed to him would end up with me. Nothing. He had left the company 6 months ago, listed as resigned, standard exit paperwork. I was grabbing coffee in the break room around 4 o'clock. Xander was there, complaining about his fantasy football league. He's usually pretty upbeat, but he seemed distracted. He kept glancing at the door. I didn't think much of it. I just figured he was hoping someone would offer him a trade. Then he asked me, completely out of the blue, if I'd been getting any strange deliveries lately. Just asked. No preamble. No, how are you? Just that. Yeah, I said, surprised. Actually, a package came for a Weston earlier. I forwarded it to mail services. He blinked slowly. Right, Weston. He didn't sound like he was making conversation anymore, more like confirming something. He didn't elaborate. He just took a long sip of his coffee and muttered something about needing another one. It was odd, really odd. And I started to think maybe it wasn't Dora being weird. Maybe Weston hadn't left on the best of terms. Maybe he owed someone money or something. Maybe this was some kind of passive-aggressive attempt to rattle him, and I just happened to get caught in the middle. It felt silly even thinking it, but it was the only thing that made any sense. I finished my coffee quickly. I had a dentist appointment I was already running late for. The dentist was fine, just a cleaning, a little nagging about flossing. I kept glancing at my phone, though Dora had texted me during the appointment. Just a smiley face. It felt off. She never just sends smiley faces. Usually it's a link to some ridiculous cat video or a complaint about Ines microwaving fish. I texted back a thumbs up, but I felt like I was responding to a signal, not a person. On the way back to the office, I took the long route, cutting through the park. I usually walk straight up Elm Street, but something felt wrong about that. It wasn't a feeling exactly, more like anticipation, as if someone knew exactly where I was going and was waiting. Stupid, right? When I got back to the building, Xander was at the front desk, talking to security. He saw me and gave me this tight little smile. Hey, just confirming my visitor registration. Visitor, Xander doesn't have visitors. He works remotely 2 days a week and usually eats lunch at his desk the other 3. Then I saw it. A delivery guy, holding a small package. He was looking right at me. Not through me, not accidentally making eye contact. Looking at me like he was expecting me. The label it was for Weston. Again, I swear this is getting ridiculous. I ducked into the break room, pretending to check emails. Luz was there making tea. Another package for Weston? She asked, without looking up. Seems someone's really determined to find him. She said it casually, too casually. It felt like she was testing me, like she already knew. I mumbled something about missed deliveries and escaped to my desk. I started backing up all my important files, just in case. Maybe Weston was involved in something shady. Maybe this was some kind of debt collection. It seemed far-fetched, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. And the way Xander and Luz both knew about the deliveries, without me saying anything, it was starting to feel like more than just coincidence. The backup finished around 5, and I felt lighter. Acknowledging the possibility of something being wrong made it less scary. I decided to just leave. I would skip dinner and go straight home. I told Luz I wasn't feeling well, which wasn't a lie. She gave me a look, not unkind but assessing. She said, "Drive safe, Ren," like she was warning me. I was already in the parking garage when my phone buzzed. It was an email from IT. The subject was urgent, system alert. My stomach dropped. I pulled over, my heart hammering, and opened it. It wasn't a virus. It was a notification that my access badge had been deactivated. It said, due to a security protocol update. A protocol update at 6 p.m. on a Friday? I tried the badge anyway. Nothing. Just a red light. Panic started to bubble up. I walked back into the lobby, hoping to talk to security, but Dora was gone. The front desk was empty. Then I saw Xander talking to Ephraim near the elevators. They stopped when they saw me. Xander's face was blank. Ephraim just stared. "Having trouble, Ren?" Xander asked, too smoothly. "My badge isn't working," I said, trying to sound calm. "And I got an email from IT." "Oh, that," Ephraim said, glancing at Xander. "There was an incident, a potential breach. They're locking down the building for a full scan." "Locking down?" "Just a precaution," Xander said, but his eyes didn't meet mine. I could feel my breath getting tight. I thought maybe Weston was involved in something big, something illegal, and they thought I knew something. That's why they were keeping me here. That had to be it. Then I noticed the music. It was faint and tinny, coming from the lobby speakers. It was that melody from the music box. The music stopped, just cut off mid-phrase. That felt significant. I tried my badge again, but nothing happened. Weston was avoiding eye contact, pretending to be deeply engrossed in his phone. He hadn't even looked up when I'd asked about the lockdown. I called Ines, straight to voicemail. Again, she always answers. I remembered the lobby receptionist, Dora. She'd been gone for 14 days now, supposedly due to a family emergency. No one talked about it, just gone. And the music box. It was delivered to my desk, with no return address. It was a stupid, ornate thing. I hadn't even wound it in days. It felt wrong to touch it now. Finally, a security guard, a younger guy, came on the intercom. He said, "Stand by for further instructions. This is not a drill." Not a drill, right? I decided to try Petra. She was in legal and always cool-headed. I explained everything, the badge, the lockdown, the music, Dora disappearing, and the box. I even told her about feeling watched. Petra listened surprisingly patiently. She said, when I'd finished, "This is probably just a really clumsy IT issue combined with some office gossip. Dora probably just quit, okay? And the music, construction next door, maybe? Honestly, you're letting this get to you." Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "You know, Dex mentioned seeing you near the server room last week. He said you looked distracted. Anything you want to tell me about that?" The server room? I had walked past it, but that was just to take a shortcut. I'd seen someone, a flash of a dark suit, disappearing around a corner, but I hadn't thought anything of it. Now it felt like a setup, like they were trying to make me look like I was up to something, like Petra was testing me. I hung up, feeling colder than before. It wasn't about me being paranoid. It was about them making me look paranoid, and they were succeeding. It's hard to talk about what came after the lockdown. Not because it was terrifying. Exactly. It was more like a slow unraveling. I was called into HR, of course. Standard procedure, they said. They just wanted to understand what I was doing near the server room. Weston from legal had filed a report. He'd seen me. I tried to explain the shortcut, the suit, but it sounded flimsy, like I was inventing details. They didn't accuse me of anything, not directly. They just expressed concern about my stress levels. They offered me time off. I took it. I needed it. But even at home, I felt watched. Not in a creepy, someone is in the house kind of way. More like my routines were known. Packages were delivered at odd times, but always when I was supposed to be getting the mail. A wrong number called, apologetic, but asking about a meeting I hadn't had. I started to think it was Ines. She'd always been ambitious, and she'd been oddly solicitous after the lockdown, asking about my well-being, offering to help with anything I needed. Maybe she was trying to push me out, make me look unstable. It made a terrible kind of sense. She'd always wanted my position. It wasn't just me either. Dora mentioned a strange email addressed to everyone in the department, but only she'd received it. It contained a single line: "Remember your obligations." She dismissed it as spam, but it rattled her. Then Luz said her apartment had been tidied. Not broken into, just things were moved. Books were rearranged. A picture was slightly askew. I haven't taken any shortcuts since. Not at work, not anywhere. And I always check the caller ID now. It's stupid. I know it probably means nothing. But I can't bring myself to just answer the phone anymore without knowing who's on the other end. Even when it's Xander, calling about dinner. I always hesitate just a beat before picking up. He doesn't say anything about it. He just waits. And that's the worst part, I think. That he understands. It's strange revisiting all of this, honestly. Life settled back into a rhythm after a while, a new normal built around quiet routines and a lot of space. But recently I found myself thinking about that time, about how easily things slipped sideways. I realized I'd never actually written it down, never fully processed it beyond the practical steps of dealing with everything. So here I am finally putting it into words. The chipped mug warmed my hands. It smelled faintly of dust and something floral. Not a pleasant floral. Like potpourri someone forgot about 10 years ago. I made instant coffee, the only option. There was no sign of anyone. I checked my phone again. There were no new messages. Tobias hadn't mentioned a key. He just said the door would be unlocked. He had been vague, I guess. Not unfriendly, just distant in the emails. He said he preferred things done a certain way, with minimal fuss. That suited me fine. I wandered through the kitchen. It was old-fashioned. Everything olive green and wood paneling. A calendar hung on the wall, stuck on October 2022, 2 years. That felt off. People usually keep calendars updated, don't they? Maybe he just hadn't gotten around to it. He was a recluse, after all. Then I saw it on the windowsill, tucked between a dried-up fern and a ceramic cat, was a photograph. It was me. I was standing in the parking lot of the grocery store back in town last Tuesday. I remember that day. I had been picking up milk. I frowned, picking it up. It was a decent quality photo, not blurry, like someone had a good camera. And another one, face down. I flipped it over. It was me walking the dog in the park, a week before that. A coldness started in my stomach. I flipped through a small stack, more of me. Leaving the post office, getting the mail, even just watering the plants on my balcony, all taken after the divorce. After I'd moved into the apartment. It had to be a mistake, some weird, elaborate prank. Maybe Bet had set it up, trying to, I don't know, scare me. She had been difficult, but why leave them here? I kept turning the pages. More photos, walking the dog, grocery shopping. Inside my apartment, it wasn't Bet. She wouldn't bother with this, too passive. This felt methodical, like someone was studying me, not trying to hurt me, not yet, but cataloging. Then I noticed something else. In the background of several pictures, a flash of color. A red pickup truck. Old, dented. I started really looking at the photos, trying to pinpoint where I'd seen it before. It wasn't in my neighborhood, not regularly anyway, but outside Winnie's bakery, and again, near the hardware store where I bought the bird feeder. Tobias hadn't mentioned anyone else being around. He'd just sent the address, said the owner was out of town. Asked me to check for leaks. It was a weird request, looking back. I should have asked more questions. I decided to walk around the house, see if I could get a better view of the property. The yard was overgrown, but I could see a dirt road running along the back, and parked approximately 1/4 mile down it, that red truck. I ducked back inside, heart hammering. Okay, maybe Tobias hadn't told me everything. Maybe he'd asked someone to keep an eye on the place while he was away, a caretaker or something. That had to be it. It was just a coincidence the truck was in the photos. It was a common enough color. Still, I locked the back door, even though it seemed ridiculous. The lock felt flimsy. I decided I'd drive into town, get a coffee, and call Tobias. See what he knew about the truck. I took a different road than the one I'd used to get here, just in case. It added 10 minutes to the drive, but I felt safer. I kept checking my rearview mirror. Nothing. But the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. The diner in Garrett's Landing was mostly empty. Old men nursing coffee, a waitress with tired eyes. I asked for a booth and dialed Tobias, straight to voicemail again. I left a message, terse this time. I said I needed to talk about the photos and the truck, and that something felt wrong. While I waited for a refill, a woman at the counter, Bet, I think the waitress called her, started watching me. It wasn't a friendly glance. It was a long, assessing stare. It made the hairs on my neck prickle. I pretended to read the chipped formica, but she didn't look away. She finally said, loud enough for me to hear, "He always liked folks who kept to themselves." I turned, confused. "Excuse me?" She just smiled, a thin, unsettling line. "Nothing, dear. Just making conversation." I finished my coffee quickly, paid, and headed for the door. That's when I saw it. The red truck, parked across the street, half hidden behind a delivery van. It hadn't been there when I arrived. I didn't run exactly, but I practically jogged to my car. The engine wouldn't turn over. Just a click, click, click. Panic tightened my chest. I tried again. Nothing. Then I saw him. Dillard, standing by the truck, arms crossed, watching. He wasn't doing anything, just watching. He looked like he was enjoying my predicament. He started walking towards me, slow and deliberate. I fumbled with the door handle, finally got it open and scrambled out, heading for the diner. Maybe Bet had a phone. Maybe someone could help. Dillard didn't hurry, but he didn't stop either. As I reached the diner door, I heard a sharp crack. I looked back. The rear passenger side window of my car was shattered. He hadn't thrown anything, it just exploded. I didn't stop to think, just pushed through the diner door and kept running. I didn't even bother with the police at first. What was I going to tell them? Some guy smashed my window and I'm paranoid. They'd laugh me out of the station. I drove straight to the next town, Havenwood. I found a motel and just sat. I stared at the walls. I kept replaying it, the window shattering without anything being thrown. It didn't make sense. Then I remembered the photos. That's what really broke me. I pulled them out again and spread them on the bed. Pictures of me getting coffee, walking my dog before everything. Me at the grocery store. Me just existing. They'd started after I left, after the divorce. It wasn't random. It was her. It had to be. I called Loretta, the lawyer. I explained everything, as much as I could. She said it sounded like harassment and advised me to file a police report. But I didn't want to deal with the police. I wanted to understand why. I called her, of course. She didn't answer. I left a message, rambling probably. I spent the next day trying to piece things together. Garrett's Landing felt staged, like I was supposed to be there, like someone wanted me there, and Dillard. He wasn't just some local thug. He was watching. He was waiting. I thought maybe he worked for her, a hired hand to scare me off. It felt contained. It felt local. I decided to drive back to Garrett's Landing, to her place. I needed answers. I found the house empty, but the door wasn't locked. Inside, it was sterile. It was too clean. And on the kitchen table, a single envelope. There was no return address. Inside, a photograph. It was me, sitting in the motel room in Havenwood, just 1 hour ago. The photograph showed the motel room window. The angle, it had to be from across the street. And a note. Just one word. Nim. Nim. The word felt heavy, like a stone in my mouth. I called Loretta. Again, she wasn't surprised. She was just tired. She said to go to the police, but I couldn't shake the feeling it wouldn't help. This wasn't a break-in. It wasn't assault. It was a violation, a creeping, insidious violation. Loretta said Nim could be anyone, an online alias, a shared acquaintance. She suggested a restraining order against Garrett, but I doubted it would matter. Garrett wasn't the one sending the photos. I started looking at old emails, going back months before the separation. I was trying to find a name, a reference, anything. Then I remembered Bet, Garrett's friend from college. She'd always been intense. She always asked questions about my work and my routines. I'd dismissed it as nosiness, small-town curiosity. Now I wasn't so sure. I imagined Bet quietly gathering information, feeding it to someone like Dillard, a hired investigator. I avoided Garrett's Landing for 1 week and stayed with Winnie, an old family friend. It felt safer there, but I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house and every passing car sent me spiraling. I started checking the locks obsessively. I started noticing things. The way a neighbor's curtains stayed drawn all day, the black pickup truck that seemed to circle the block twice. I started to see patterns, connections that probably weren't there. I was convinced they were building a case against me, trying to paint me as unstable, as dangerous. It was the only thing that made sense. Now, I won't agree to anything without a second look at the person asking. I do a quick search. I check public records. It's exhausting. It's isolating. I missed a friend's birthday party last month. I couldn't bring myself to go. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was arranged. A setup. I told myself it's worth it, this caution. But sometimes, when the light hits just right on a dusty window pane, I still see a flash of a lens. I wasn't looking for anything like this when I was scrolling through a forum last week, just killing time on a Sunday evening. Then someone posted about receiving a misdelivered package, a thick envelope full of someone else's financial records. It was the detail about the night vision equipment that stopped me cold. It was almost a word-for-word match to something that happened to me a few months ago. And that's why I'm telling this story now, because reading that post felt unsettlingly familiar. The chipped ceramic of my mug warmed my hands Tuesday morning. Rain against the window, the kind that just smeared everything gray. I was scrolling through old emails, trying to find that invoice from the plumber when I remembered Kaz. It wasn't a conscious thought, more like a flicker. Just Kaz. He'd asked about my security cameras, hadn't he? Months ago. At the block party, he said he was thinking of getting some, wanted to know what brand I used, and if the installation was a pain, I'd told him about the Ring doorbell and the 2 cameras covering the backyard. He just nodded and asked if they recorded to the cloud, seemed perfectly normal. A little intense about it, maybe, like he wasn't just casually curious. I'd assumed he was having trouble with break-ins in his neighborhood and figured it was a preventative thing. He lived over on Gloria Street, a little further out. He was a quiet guy. He kept to himself. I hadn't seen him since. Then the forum post. The financial records, the night vision, and the same brand of camera I had. It wasn't just a coincidence. I went back to the post and read it again. Someone mentioned the delivery address, partial and blurred in the image. Something about G Street, Gloria Street. Maybe he was helping someone else. A friend, a relative, someone who was worried about their security. It felt less sinister that way. I started searching for Kaz online. Not much came up. A LinkedIn profile, accountant, a small bland headshot, no family listed, no recent activity, just nothing. It was unsettling in its own way, like he'd actively scrubbed himself from the internet. Or maybe he just wasn't on the internet much. People like that exist, right? I closed my laptop, the rain still drumming against the glass. I felt watched. I started taking the long way home from the grocery store. Just adding a few turns. It wasn't a big deal. Just a different route through Gloria's neighborhood. Gloria always had the best decorations for Halloween, so it was kind of scenic. I told myself, but it was really to avoid Kaz's street. It felt stupid, honestly. Like I was a kid hiding from the school bully. Then I saw his car. Not on his street, parked 2 blocks over, near the park. And he was watching, not obviously, not staring, just present. Sitting there with the engine off. When I realized he was looking in my direction, I ducked my head and pretended to be really engrossed in the expiration date on a carton of eggs. It felt ridiculous. I drove faster. The next day, I found a small, smooth stone on my porch. Gray, almost perfectly round. I don't have a garden. I don't collect stones. It was just there. I remembered Kaz mentioning he collected rocks as a kid. He'd said something about finding peace in their stillness. I almost laughed. Maybe he was just trying to be friendly? A weird, awkward attempt to connect. I started noticing things. The way he always seemed to be outside when I took the trash out. The brief flash of headlights in my rearview mirror when I left for work early. Small things, coincidences, but they were adding up. I tried to make eye contact with him once. Just a quick nod. He looked right through me, like I wasn't even there. Then I remembered the forum post, the one about the misdelivered package. Someone mentioned a specific brand of thermal imaging scope. I went back and looked it up. Kaz worked part-time at an electronics store that carried them. It had to be a coincidence. He was an accountant. For God's sake, not some survivalist, but the stone, the car, the feeling of being watched. It didn't feel like coincidence anymore. I kept replaying the store thing in my head. Kaz selling thermal scopes. It felt deliberate, like he'd wanted me to find out. I started driving Gloria Street differently, taking different routes to the grocery store, trying to catch him unawares. He was always there, not doing anything, just present, parked a block over, walking his dog at the same time I was, browsing the same aisle at the store. It wasn't aggressive, not obviously, more like he was calibrating something. Then yesterday, I found the flyer, tucked under my windshield wiper. Glossy paper, black and white photo. It wasn't a political thing, not exactly. It was a neighborhood watch announcement, but it was weird, hyper-focused on suspicious activity, describing people who walked their dogs too often, who took different routes to work, who observed things. It even had a crudely drawn map of the park, with circles around specific benches. And then I saw the name at the bottom. Concerned citizens of Gloria Street, contact OB. Old man OB who lived 3 doors down. He barely spoke to anyone. I remember him complaining about kids cutting through yards last Halloween, right after Gloria's decorations went up. I thought he was just being a grouch. That's when I decided to go over. Just talk. It was around 10 last night. I walked to his door, and when I rang the bell, I heard movement inside, then nothing. I rang again. Still nothing. I tried the doorknob. It turned. The door wasn't locked. I pushed it open and called out, "Obi." The house was dark, empty, but the television was on, tuned to a static channel. And on the coffee table, a file folder, labeled Subject Observer. My stomach dropped. I didn't even register the sound of the door closing behind me until it clicked. And then a voice, right behind me. Looking for something? It wasn't Obi, it was Kaz. He smelled like metal. The metallic smell was old, like a battery left in a drawer too long. Kaz didn't say anything else, just stood there blocking the doorway. I backed away, mumbled something about a wrong address, and got out. I didn't sleep, not a wink. First thing in the morning, I went to Glenn at the precinct. I tried to explain about the file, about Obi's house being unlocked, about Kaz smelling like whatever that was. Glenn was polite, but I could see he thought I was stressed. He took a report, mostly to get me to leave, I think. He said they'd do a welfare check on Obi. I started writing everything down, every time I'd seen Kaz, every odd thing that had happened. The rock on my porch, the way he'd always seemed to be around. I wanted something solid, something to show Glenn if he didn't take me seriously. I even included the neighborhood watch flyer, highlighted the parts about observing suspicious activity. I thought maybe Kaz was trying to start some kind of vigilante thing. He seemed the type, quiet, meticulous, a little too interested in what everyone else was doing. 2 days later, Glenn called. Obi was fine. He said he'd been visiting his daughter out of state and hadn't told anyone. The house was unlocked because he'd forgotten. There was no sign of forced entry, and no sign of Kaz. He said they ran Kaz's name. He had a clean record. He was an accountant and collects rocks. Glenn sounded dismissive. Then I remembered the packages, the misdelivered ones. They weren't going to Obi or me. They were addressed to a Vito Corsi, a post office box downtown. I just tossed them, figuring it was a mistake. Now I looked up Vito Corsi online. It was a shell corporation, registered to an address that didn't exist. And then I found a forum, a little used message board for taxidermy. Vito Corsi was a frequent poster. He posted detailed instructions, requests for specific tools, and discussions about preserving things. Not animals, human things. That's when I realized Kaz wasn't watching the neighborhood. He was preparing. He was getting ready to do something. It's been years, 7 or 8. I still think about Obi's house. Not constantly, not like I did at first. It's more of a texture now, a dull ache in the back of my mind. I moved eventually. I couldn't stay there, not after everything. I tried to follow up with Glenn after finding the forum posts. He was less interested. He said they'd keep an eye on Obi, that Kaz was probably just a weirdo with a hobby. He said I was letting my imagination run wild. I think he thought I was lonely. Gloria from next door agreed. She said I'd been working too much. But I kept digging. I found links between Vito Corsi and a few other shell companies. They all led to dead ends, but they were all purchasing the same kinds of things. Tools, chemicals, display cases, things you wouldn't need for rock collecting. I started to think it wasn't about taxidermy at all. It was about control, about collecting people, not preserving them. Like Obi was building a collection, and Kaz was his procurer. Then Obi sold the house. It was a quick sale for cash. He disappeared, and Kaz with him, I assumed. I thought they'd gone somewhere remote, somewhere they could continue, some cabin in the woods. That's what I told myself anyway. It was easier to picture than the alternative. I haven't seen either of them since. Still, I check. Not actively, not anymore. But if I see an older man who looks vaguely like Obi, or someone with that same metallic scent, I really notice. Yesterday, I was getting coffee. The barista, Kira, was new. She had a silver ring on her hand, a heavy one with a strange, almost industrial design. For a split second, it smelled like metal shavings. Just for a second. I blinked. It smelled like coffee again. I gave her a bigger tip, just in case.